Hello, everybody. Oop,
Tell me when you're ready.
we're going. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode here of the Steam Whistle. This is a Georgia Tech Sports Podcast, and it's been a couple months since one of these episodes came out. I think the last one I did was, it may have been middle of the football season, but now it's already February, and I thought that I might as well get one of these out to at least help the football off season move along, and also give Tech fans something to listen to, especially in this sort of transitional period where basketball's sort of winding down and baseball's about to start up. The guest I have on today has sort of grown up all around Georgia Tech and Georgia Tech athletics, even though he never actually went to the Institute. He was practically born into Georgia Tech royalty. He's the son of former Yellow Jacket quarterback Jimmy Southard, who played in the late 40s under Bobby Dodd, and he's the father of a player who played against Tech, and his son Kirby, who played at Mercer and played against Georgia Tech in 2016. He has had season tickets for, I don't even know. You can tell me that later. But this is John Southard. John, welcome. Thank you for joining me today, and this episode's just going to be us talking about your 6+ decades around Georgia Tech athletics and being a fan.
Well, Daniel, appreciate you having me on. I've obviously got some few things to talk about, but while I did not go to Georgia Tech, I ended up going to Mercer of Atlanta. But I was been all around Tech, and oh my goodness, between my dad being involved with the Letter Winners Club and my mother being a bigger sports fan than my father, I've just been around it forever. Like yourself, it's been a labor of love.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first, before I even get into your life, not a lot of people, just because of time, father time, not a lot of people know about your dad. Your dad, if I get this right, he played from, technically...
He played from 46 to 49. Coach Dodd became head coach in 45. He was kind of really the first quarterback to kind of get Tech kind of rolling, set the stage kind of for the magnificent run we had in the 1950s.
And he was this before, or were freshmen allowed? Because I know...
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. And that was one of the things I was going to mention to you, that he did make the varsity as a freshman and played at Tennessee in his first game, and Frank Bowles got hurt, and another quarterback got hurt. And it's one of the things I always remember my father talking about, was that he actually started the second half of the very first college football game that he ever played in his life, and he always told us that it was the most nervous he'd ever been in his life.
I may get into that later, because that was, Tech and Tennessee, they had those were one of 4 games probably that, if it's late 40s, Dodd and Needland played 4 times, and those
Correct.
were very big battles because it was teacher versus student.
Absolutely.
And then, and he, Dodd had, I think his second or third year his first year was a losing season. His second year, I think, they made a bowl. In their third and fourth years, I think he hit 48, 49. I think they went 7-3 in both of them, but they were only 6 bowl games back then. So
Correct.
They would have made a bowl game now, but they went 7.
He actually played in 2. He played in the Orange Bowl, and then also played in the Oil Bowl.
Oh, right, they did make 2.
Yeah, which later, by the way, became the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl.
Yeah, and now basically there were some hiatuses, but it's the Texas Bowl now. It was in Houston, and they played St. Mary's, I believe.
Correct.
Which is which of course, their program's now discontinued. But so, did he tell? Well, first, what was it like? You mentioned that your mom liked sports more than your dad. But what was it like? Being the son of a former Tech quarterback.
Well, that's a great question. First of all, you'd have to understand my father, that he never talked about it. Okay, he wasn't one to bring up his football exploits. He didn't even tell anybody in the business that he was in that, what he had done in our family business when he was calling on customers up here in North Carolina. He never told anybody that he played. he was one of those guys, Daniel, that was just comfortable in his own skin. I look back later in my life that when we were out going out to eat dinner and people would see my father and kind of make a big deal out of it and, want his autograph or want to talk to him about Tech football. I look back at it now in a different light than I did at the time, but it was, quite special, and it had a lot of pros and cons, some cons to it because Georgia fans didn't particularly like him too much, but I guess that's part of it.
And then your mom. When did your dad meet your mom? They met
in high school.
They met in high school.
They met in high school, and they got married. Coach Dodd was a believer in players getting married if they wanted to, and the coaches did not mind the players getting married provided they were online to graduate. And my father was, and so my dad and my mom got married right before my father's senior year down at Tech, which would be 1949. And they lived in an apartment off campus, but it was really neat. And but he was heavily involved with the Letter Rounds Club, and I've tried to help out the Tech Athletic Association in that manner, like he did.
And a funny quote from Dodd about players getting married. He said once, "Our bowl trips would be the biggest family affair you've ever seen."
That is correct. He also made the comment that you knew where they were at night.
Yeah.
You didn't have to worry about them.
I'm not saying, honestly, it sounds unusual, but when he explained it, when you read his book and hear what he said about it, it honestly made sense because you could know that they were behaved or whatever and
Right.
staying out of trouble. So,
Absolutely.
So you were born, when were you born?
I was born, I'm the youngest of four. I have two older brothers and an older sister, and I was born, I'm soon to be 66. I'm 65 years old. I was born in 1960. I started going to games with my father about 67, 68, but I really started to get into it, Daniel, when 1969. I do remember Jack Williams and Rock Berdoni, Smiley Gebhardt, and those kind of players that I kind of grew up with when I was young, making an impact on me. And Atlanta was a different time, different city back then, and it was really, games were pretty much really good, solid crowds back then.
Well, pro sports was new. And of course, before pro sports, Tech was the game in town, and they were still pretty much new. And the place, for people who don't know, in the late '60s and up into the '80s, it sat nearly 60,000 people.
It did. And we had some really great crowds, really big crowds in the Georgia game, obviously, and had some great crowds for Tennessee and Auburn also.
And then I think Notre Dame would occasionally come as well.
And they would, and they did. And they always, obviously bring a fan base also. But, it was tough for Tech because when they pulled out of the SEC, you look back, hindsight's 20/20 for everybody, and if you look back at it, I'm sure they wouldn't do it now, but it is what it is, and it was a tough call, but it's Tech has just tried to fight through it.
Well, I think one, that had a good reason to with the 140 rule, and while looking back, it maybe wasn't a good decision. I think it worked out. We're not Tulane. It ended up way worse for them.
True. We've done very well with the biggest thing that the coaches that we had during the '70s, the ones that I kind of grew up with, from Coach Carson, Fulcher, and Pepper. It was amazing how our facilities had really fallen behind, and it was one of those things that we desperately needed the edge building. And believe it or not, if you read Ken King's book on Jimmy Carter, was a big part of the edge building getting built, and bless his heart for doing so.
And what were those coaches like? Because that's another reason why Tech for people who don't know, Tech football wasn't bad in the '70s, but
correct.
But they it wasn't like
people wanted to have the Dodd
Yeah.
He was so great with the press. He was so great around fans. He just had that just demeanor about him that just made people feel good. And he was, on top of that, extremely smart football coach. And the bar was high. There was no way anybody could come in behind Dodd and really kind of do well. But all of them had their moments, and we really needed to get our facilities up to par. And that's where we fell behind, was really bad in the 70s. I got to tell you, Dan, I always joked that underneath the east stands, the bathrooms were so bad underneath there that I always joked and said that John Heisman went to the bathroom in there.
And so, but the first coach that you said your first vivid memories came in 69 and probably 70.
Right.
And so
That's
Bud Carson, who was,
Correct.
and there's going to be a theme which I'll mention later with these guys in the 70s, but Bud Carson, what do you remember about him? I don't know if you ever really encountered him because you were young, but what kind of guy was he, or what kind of coach was he? I know
he was a firm, he was kind of like with the Olympics going on, kind of a Herb Brooks kind of guy with the players, tough, firm, was not to be their friend per se, but yeah, he did have some really good coaches around him. Tom Moore and some others that were really good football coaches there on his staff. Lamar Leachman was another one. Jerry Glanville, who was the ex-Falcons football coach, was on there. Bill Lewis was on the staff. So he had some really good coaches. He came within an eyelash of beating Georgia 3 years in a row, which, to his credit, that was probably Coach Carson's greatest fame. He came within Georgia had a stout team in 71 and had only lost one game, and Tech had the lead until the final minute of the game, and it was one that got away, unfortunately. But he really had the team prepared.
And then and that was 71, and they lost the Peach Bowl to Ole Miss. The year before, 1970, that was a great year. They won 9 games.
Yes, correct. And he had a tough loss. Daniel, in 71. He had a tough loss to Army. I had been to the Michigan State game with my father. Michigan State had Billy Joe Dupree and Joe DeLemoore as an offensive lineman, and Tech had a really big game. Actually won the game 10-0, and Michigan State was, quote, loaded, and Tech was still able to come out with the W. But unfortunately played Army the next week. Army had a really good team that people didn't know about, and Army pulled out a thin victory. And it was a tough season for Coach Carson, but he was following Dodd, and it was the hill was so high nobody could achieve it. But my memories of him was being a really good coach. Obviously went to the pros and did very well, and he was just in a really tight spot.
Oh yeah, not an easy job following a legend. And then there was the 2 years where Fulcher was coach, and he was
Right.
young, and he came from, I think, the now defunct University of Tampa program.
Correct. He did, and he was, Dodd had handpicked him, and it turned out to be a tough situation. He had a rocky relationship with some of the players, and it all came to a head with on a ticket snafu with Eddie McShann, and he really. Tech won the bowl game against Iowa State in the Liberty Bowl, but he really kind of lost his love for coaching and was kind of looking to get out of it. And Coach Dodd actually coaxed him into staying one more year. He wanted to leave after 1 year, but Coach Dodd said, "You can't do that to me," and he made him stay another year, and he did. And then I will tell you this, Tech made a run, and I want the listeners to know this. Tech made a run to try to get Frank Broyles back. And it was really, Daniel, the only time that Frank Broyles actually, quote, looked at it. Okay? Tech had been trying to get Broyles to come home. Broyles had played football at Decatur with my father, okay? And we were trying to get him back. And it was really the only time in his coaching career that he actually looked at it. They presented him with an unbelievable offer that he turned down, but he only coached just about 4 more years after he turned us down, and just got out of coaching, was an athletic director just like Coach Dodd. But then we brought in Pepper. Pepper energetic. He was full of energy. But deep down behind the scenes, he was Pepper probably. It's amazing he did as well as he did in the recruiting that he did, considering how bad our facilities were becoming.
Well, Pepper was one. I have a Georgia neighbor, really old UGA neighbor, probably I think he's 82, 83 years old now. And he said, of all the hires that Tech made in the 70s, he said he really thought Tech was going to hit it big time with Pepper, because Pepper had taken Kansas to the Orange Bowl, which was a remarkable job. And then he had a bad start at UCLA, but then he got them going again. And,
correct.
And so for Tech to get him back,
I remember that vividly. I remember Coach Pepper Rogers making the comment that the only school that he would ever leave UCLA for would have been Georgia Tech.
And he did. And another thing is,
I want to tell you this, but when we couldn't reach an agreement with Coach Broyles pointed the finger and said, "You need to go after Pepper Rogers."
Yeah, and I was about to say something about Broyles was, I think that Tech had tried getting him, and tell me if I'm wrong, after Dodd, I think 67 Tech had tried to get Broyles, right?
They had looked at it, but they weren't getting to first base. I mean, his wife, they had children, she liked living in Fayetteville, and he was kind of adamant. He was just like Coach Dodd in Atlanta. He was king of the state, running everything over there, and there was no way at that time that I don't think they could have ever gotten him out of there. I know that they had their eye on him. Obviously, a lot of people obviously wanted him back. It would have been interesting to see how he could have done, but Tech made a great run at him. He turned it down. But like I said earlier, he only coached like 4 more years.
And what I was going to say was, I have heard stories that Bobby Dodd told him, "You stay there," which a lot of Tech fans are like, "Why would you?"
You hear that. He knew Coach Dodd knew that the Tech job was a tough job. Obviously, everybody knows that. But we were falling behind. We were falling behind desperately in facilities. Okay, we needed. I mean, people who were going to games back during that time when I was there, if you look at what we're getting ready to do to Bobby Dodd Stadium, it's something out of a cartoon. It's like the Jetsons. It's like the stadium has come so far in my lifetime. It's unbelievable compared to where we used to be to where we're getting ready to be real quick.
And Pepper had some decent teams.
Yeah.
He had the wishbone, which was sort of the preeminent offense of the 70s. And who were the quarterbacks? Rudy Allen was one of them.
Yeah, we started off with we started off with Danny Myers and Rudy Allen. Those two, Rudy Allen, Danny Myers is 21. Rudy Allen is number 9. You can tell I remember a little bit, can't you? And then we had some really great running backs. Oh my goodness, great running backs. David Sims from Decatur, Adrian Rucker from Tennessee, Lee Ivory over by the Augusta area. Just unbelievable from Thompson, Georgia. Great running backs during that time. And Pepper did a good job. I would have liked to have seen what Pepper could have done had he had the facilities that he really needed.
Oh, yeah. And the thing about Pepper was he was obviously, and that was what I was going to say, the theme with these 70s and early 80s hires were they kept getting Dodd disciples. Whether they were an assistant or had played. But the thing with Pepper was, although he was a former Tech quarterback, he was really sort of a break from tradition in terms of the way he behaved. Pepper Rogers,
he was a character. Now those are capital letters there, character. He'd ride his motorcycle to come to practice, and he'd perm his hair, and he was tailor-made for television. Between he and Ned West, who was the sports information guy at the time, I mean, all these celebrities that you would have on the Pepper Rogers football show were crazy, from Burt Reynolds to many others that were on his TV highlight show, and Pepper was quite an entertainer.
And I've joked before, and I've said, I wish I was around to have seen it, but I joke and say, Pepper Rogers may have been, if there was one man who was like the embodiment of the 1970s, it may have been Pepper Rogers.
You're 1,000% right on the money.
I mean, and
yeah, that was Pepper.
And that sort of, from what I've heard, that may have, of course, the loss in the Peach Bowl, and two losses in '78. The loss to Georgia, the loss in the Peach Bowl, and then '79, the disappointing year. That sort of frustrated the board. And I don't know if it was even Weaver who made the decision. I think it was the alumni who decided to get rid of him.
Just funny as I remember Weaver letting Pepper go, but Pepper was the one that got Weaver the athletic job, as I can recall. It was, you mentioned the two games that Tech had some big wins against Georgia in the 70s, but had just some unbelievable tough luck, okay? The 71 Georgia game, the 73 Georgia game that I was at with my parents. We had Georgia on the ropes in 76 when they would later play Pittsburgh in the Sugar Bowl, and they beat us like 16-13 with a field goal at the end of the game. And then also the 78 game with Mike Kelly and Eddie Lee Ivory getting hurt. So we had played them extremely hard, but had some just tough luck was on our side during that time, and had some really tough losses, and we lost some momentum on that.
And then 79, it was 4-6-1, which on paper that's not a good year, but it doesn't look like a bad year. But I want to say their wins were, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know they beat William and Mary, Navy, Duke, and someone else, but it wasn't impressive.
They had some. It was nothing really impressive. Now remember most of the 79 team. We still had Mike Kelly. We were missing Eddie Lee Ivory. We did have two linebackers that would later go and play in the NFL. Tech's defense was led by Henry Johnson, number 54, really good a linebacker. We had beat Georgia to get him, and then we had Al Richardson, who had come from Miami, and he developed into an NFL linebacker. He played for the Falcons for about 6 or 7 years, while Henry Johnson played for the Minnesota Vikings. And those two guys were kind of carrying us per se. We had Lawrence Sweet and Low in the secondary back then, and I will say this: I thought that when Pepper was gone, Tech needed somebody to kind of rally the troops, and I thought that Bill Curry did about as good a job of that as anybody, and was the right man at the right time and the right coach to kind of get our program going back in the right direction. And he did. Obviously, Pat Swilling and Robert Levette, Jerry Mays, some guys that came in during his tenure, and Phil Mays played for Bobby Ross there at the end, really kind of got us settled, and we started making a comeback. We had a big win over Virginia in 1983 that was on TBS TV. That kind of was a landmark. It was a good win. We also had a big win over Tennessee, and I believe it was 82.
Jack Westbrook had a return.
Exactly. Jack Westbrook returned a punt return.
Now, before you get to the rest of Curry's tenure, I do want to ask, because one, Homer Rice comes in. I don't think people understand how important he was.
Let me tell you something. He was the right guy at the right spot.
Oh, absolutely.
We were about as bad as we could be facility-wise, and we just had to start, okay, this is where we are. This is what we need to do. And he was a great guy, great fundraiser, and we got some things going. We got some Georgia Tech Letter Winners clubs going out there, the fan clubs out there, Yellow Jacket Club meetings. He got that going. He had some good people on staff, too. He had Frank Bell. There was an energetic guy from Decatur that was in the Athletic Association at the time, and had some really energetic people that were working behind the scenes, and we just started to make a comeback out of it.
And I've heard that what sold him to finally come, because they had called him about coming, and he had been with the Bengals, and he's like, I'm in the pros, I don't need to come. And then Dodd apparently said, if you don't come, they might drop football, and that convinced him.
That was on the table. I've heard that also. That's unbelievable that we could drop so low, but it wasn't, I believe it was so much you wanted to drop it, but it was maybe drop it and go into the Ivy League. We were in a pickle, and we were able to get them. A lot of people don't remember this, Daniel, but I want to let you know that Homer had athletic experience because he was the head athletic director at the University
Yes.
of North Carolina for 5 years during that time in the 70s. Okay, and he knew Dean and
Yep.
knew all
Bill Dooley.
Bill Guthrie and all the group that Rory Williams. He knew them all, and he was with them for 5 years, and kind of got back into the coaching. Was with the Bengals, and he was at Rice University for a while. And then Homer finally, when he got to Tech, was right place, right time. And he just, he really got our program getting situated. We got the Edge building built. We started making improvements to the Alexander Memorial. We started to come out of it slowly.
And it wasn't of course, it's funny because football had arguably the biggest triumph of them all, which we'll get to later, but it was by far the least consistent during Homer Rice's tenure. It was down, up, back down again. It was nuts.
That's the stock market.
And so you have unbelievable patience shown by not only Homer Rice, but the entire Tech fan base. In today's game, I don't think Bill Curry would have made it, which is understandable.
You're
but his
probably right. And a lot of people would have wanted Bobby Ross was on his third struggling. He really went. I think he went 2-9 and 3-8 the first 2 years, and was struggling in year 3. And then we finally had a big win we beat Maryland, but that wasn't a big win for Bobby Ross. After beating Maryland, was going up to Clemson and beating them in Death Valley on their homecoming. And that's when the Tech football program turned around, and that was 1989.
89, and then of course Curry. I guess Curry had kind of shown some glimpses of promise because his roster was, I mean this respectfully to every member of the 80 team, but that's probably the worst team Tech has ever had in terms of pure talent.
We did not have much.
And they
did not have much. We had Mike Kelly and a few others. I'm trying to think because
didn't Ken Wisenhunt play quarterback against Notre Dame?
He did play tight end during that time. He played tight end, but he kind of quarterbacked a little bit in that Notre Dame game. We had a linebacker during that time in that Notre Dame win when we tied him. He ended up not making it academically. There's a gentleman by the name of Robert Duras. Was a great linebacker for us, and he had a stellar game in that Notre Dame game to help us tie that game. But I was at the Notre Dame game when we tied them, and Tech defense really played well in that game.
And then a year later, Robert Levette makes his debut. Another thing Bill Curry did, and this is kind of me pivoting back to earlier because this is before
I got to tell you, Levette came on board in 81.
81. And I was about to talk about, but another thing Bill Curry did was he got Tech and Bama back together for that 6 or 7 year stretch where they played each other. And because he was sort of the middleman between Bear Bryant and Bobby Dodd.
And he was.
And in that 81 game.
And the tough thing that happened with the Tick Granting thing that happened was a tough thing. And Tech, I was not at the game, but I do want to tell you that when Tech beat Bama in 62. Yeah, 62. That my mom and dad and my oldest brother were at the game. My oldest brother was 11 years old, and we still talk about it to this day. And my father, I got to tell the audience this, my father's leaving the stadium, some fraternity guy handed him a whiskey bottle and said, "Hey, great win for Tech, you want a sip?" And my dad said, "You bet I do." And took a sip.
I've heard that it was just nuts, the whole scene. And then 19 years later, Bill Curry goes into Legion Field with a team who wouldn't win another game all year, and somehow, with freshman Robert Levette in his first ever game, and Wisenhunt made a couple big catches and managed to win in that game.
Yeah, Danny, I got to tell you, we won that game in 80. Alabama had 5 turnovers in the game.
Yeah, yes. I mean, you have to with how good Bama was. I mean, this wasn't a bad Bama team. I think they ended up winning 9 games. Of how good they were and how bad Tech was, there had to be turnovers. There had to be something for it to be close.
Lady Luck was on our side in that game.
And then, but in 81, they lost 10 straight. People have always said that the Jeff years, which we'll get to in detail later, were the worst in the history of Tech football. And I I'm happy I was not alive in that 3-year stretch from 79 to 81.
Oh, it was tough. And Georgia's in their heyday.
Yes.
Georgia's in the middle of their heyday during that time, and we are literally at rock bottom. It was so, I mean, oh my God, Herschel Walker was over there, and it's, all you could hear was Walker my dog, and it was challenging, to put it this way, to be a Tech fan, but you get thick skin and you just deal with it.
And it helped that 82 they were able to, their schedule got easier, but they beat Tennessee and they posted a winning record, which was a big improvement. 83,
yep. 6-5, I think.
Yeah, 6-5, so they would have made a bowl if they were, nowadays. But
in today's day, sure.
And 83, they had a tougher schedule, and they went 3-8, but they nearly beat Georgia, and that was the arrival of John Dewberry from Georgia.
Correct.
And
Correct. He was throwing a pass to Darrell Wise that got intercepted late in the game. Remember that. And
he was quite a character, still is to an extent, because my dad is in the real estate business, and so my dad is very aware of him. They call him the king of empty lots.
Okay.
But he's I see, and I mean this respectfully to him, because who knows, he could listen to this, but I see why Georgia fans hated him. My neighbor, who I told you is 80 years old, he says, of every Tech player I have ever, he's like me. There are some Tech players that I liked. As a Tech fan, I respect Matthew Stafford. I respect David Pollock. Even Herschel Walker. Outside of politics, Herschel Walker was just such an athlete that you have to respect it. He said, and then there are the guys you hate. He said, I hated, these are his words, I hated John Dewberry.
Well, Dewberry was a good running, throwing. He wasn't a great passer, but could get the job done. He did have a really good offensive coordinator when we brought in Dwayne Painter, and really that's going into 84. That's when we went into Athens and took care of them in their backyard. And we started the corner. We had some really Curry had switched up his staff a little bit per se.
Don Lindsay
and had Dwayne Painter on the offensive side, and we started. That was when Bill started to turn it around per se.
Oh, absolutely, and that was a weird year because 84 they went 6-4-1, which again, because there weren't many bowls back then, they didn't play in the postseason, but they beat Bama, Clemson, and Georgia in the same year, which is remarkable.
Correct. I want you to know we also had another really good coordinator on that too. We had Don Lindsay on defense.
That's it. Yeah, I said.
Don Lindsay was an excellent defensive coordinator. We moved cleat pounds to defense, and it does help having a Pat Swilling that's linebacker on the edge, and Ted Roof was anchoring the middle, and we just stuck with Reggie Rutland, Mike Travis, some of the other players that I remember off that team.
Wasn't there a guy, and this may have been the next year, but there was a guy who played baseball whose name escapes me, who was also on Ricardo Ingram, I think.
Oh yeah. Great. He did a great baseball player. Kind of when he got through at Tech, went into baseball. Don't know if he ever made it to the show, but really made it. Stayed and got coaching in Major League Baseball. And Ricardo was a stellar defensive back. He was a safety, and he would bring the wood.
In 84, you're right, that was a turning point, and then 85 was sort of, well, it's funny, I was going to say breakout year, but it started kind of quietly, and Tech, I don't think, was ranked. Tech had been ranked at moments in 84 because they started 3-0. Tech was not ranked in 85 until the end of the season, but they really put it together that year. They tied Tennessee.
It was defense.
Absolutely, that was the Blackwatch.
Defense of that time, and they got everything done. Dewberry was playing with an injury that Tech kind of kept under quiet. While he had a good year, it wasn't quite as good as his junior year, but he was playing hurt, and we were still able to get. Jerry Mose was a freshman on that team.
Yeah, and they had all of their games were the games that they didn't win, all of them were close. One of them was a tie with a great Tennessee team.
Yes, my mom and dad were at that game. We had Tennessee beat on ESPN. It's one of the few mistakes Don Lindsay made. We went into a prevent defense. I'm talking about went into a prevent defense with about 30 to 20-something seconds to go in the game, and they got some passes and were able to kick a long field goal at the end of the game to even tie us. We tied them, but it was the game that we should have had. It was right there for the taking, and we unfortunately didn't do it. But we really, so we went 9-2-1. Really could have easily won 10 games.
And then the other game I was going to talk about, I forget. I think Virginia was the other loss, but another loss that I won't say was impressive, but kind of showed how good that team was. They nearly beat Bo Jackson's Auburn. They lost by 3.
Yes, I was at that game. Yes, Bo had a long run. Kind of Kerry Lee caught a touchdown pass. Jerry Mays had a touchdown run. You can still, and that's been a while, by the way. In my mind, I can still see these plays. It's just fun to talk about it because it brings back so many good memories. But we did play Auburn very tough. They had Pat Dye as coach, and they had Bo, and Tech didn't win it. We gave Auburn everything they could take.
I would say Pat Dye was probably Bill Curry's kryptonite because he couldn't beat him when he coached at Tech, and he couldn't beat him when he coached at Alabama. Speaking of which, I think this is a good switch of topic in that, Tech and Bama now they're not seen as rivals at all, but since they had played in the 80s, they were still seen as kind of somewhat enemies, and now Bill Curry leaves. What was that whole ordeal or transition like? Curry leaving and then getting Ross.
Stunning. I remember when I heard he was being interviewed for the job, I was like, okay. I thought it was just a courtesy interview, and I ended up going to watch Tech play in basketball in Winston-Salem at Wake Forest. I went up with a good friend of mine. We went up to North Carolina, spent the night. We saw an afternoon basketball game. Tech won in Winston-Salem. And we're driving back, and all of a sudden the news had broken out that Curry had been offered and had taken the job. So it was, needless to say, it was stunning to no end. I was stunned that he was offered the job, but they were wanting to run kind of get a good, clean image out there, and Bill certainly fit that mold. And
then Tech makes, for the first time since Dodd stepped down, Tech went outside his tree and hired Bobby Ross.
Correct. And he had just been flirting with the pros. I think he'd been flirting with the
Bills.
Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, Bills, I think maybe with Marv Levy. And was kind of flirting to maybe going to go talk to Kansas City. And Homer reached out to him and talked to him. And things happened rather quickly. Offered him the job because he had left Maryland because of the Lynn Bond situation and the uncertainty going on there, and he left, and he was available. And let me tell you something, Bobby Ross, he inherited a tough situation. All the players there were Bill Curry guys, and here he was totally opposite. And Coach Ross was really in a tough spot, and it wasn't bless his heart until the third season. The guys finally started coming around, started taking responsibility, kind of more or less in a lot of ways growing up. And he brought Sean Jones in, and let me tell you, the rest is history because number 10 was one great player.
And of course, 89, they turned 89 now, of all the teams that missed a bowl, especially in the last 40 years, that was absurd.
The slow start hurt them because they won like 7 in a row or 7 out of 8.
They lost to Duke. They lost to Spurrier.
In Atlanta. And they had a really good running back, Rodney Hampton. He got hurt, and but I still think if he's healthy, Tech had him that day. We were really kind of owning them, especially on the line of scrimmage, and dominating the game. It was a huge Tech win, and really kind of solidified Ross. And he got in. Players were starting to come around to him, and it really hurt me when he left Tech to go to the pros. I think he felt like he had done everything that he could do. A lot of people don't know this, Daniel, and I want to make sure that you know this. after Tech won the national championship, Bobby Ross had an interview with the Cleveland Browns. Okay, he did not get the offer, didn't get the job, but we almost came close to losing him right after we won the national championship. So we were lucky that he didn't leave. We had him one more year. That's the year we went to the Aloha Bowl.
Well, we got 90. That must have been just an incredible thrill ride. And we'll talk about, after I'm done going through memory lane on football, I'll talk about basketball. But, of course, April, you had that thing go down with that thrill ride and Lethal Weapon 3 and all that fun. And then, preseason, there must have been some excitement because, they had turned the corner in '89 and they're returning a bunch of guys. But no one, did anybody expect, besides the team, because I've heard Ken Swilling get interviewed and say, we thought we were great, but there must have not been much talk about being that good.
Correct. I thought we were going to have a team that would lose maybe a couple of games. And we could have lost a couple. Lady Luck was on our side. The Virginia game, especially at their place, we caught a few breaks on turnovers. That game was a flip-flop, and thank goodness we were able to win it at the end. But that was a game that turned the tide, and it's almost like stars were aligned, and we were able to bring it in. But it was an unbelievable season. One thing that a lot of people, and I remember Coach Ross making a comment about it, that we were lucky that we avoided the injury bug that season. And we didn't have a whole lot of depth, and we were able to avoid injury, and guys were able to play out. And unbelievable time. I thought we'd end up maybe in a bowl game like the Gator Bowl, but we just kept winning some close games. Obviously had a close game against Clemson, 21-19, and then 6-3 versus Virginia Tech with Sisson hitting a field goal at the end. Just so many. Hold your breath, and it was a crazy season. But we won an incredible amount of close games.
And then what was I will say stupid. What was so stupid was the ACC's contract wasn't with the Orange Bowl then, so you have such a good year and you go to the Citrus Bowl of all places.
Isn't that crazy? In Virginia, who we beat, ended up going to the Sugar Bowl.
And they played Tennessee, but I think Tech still got a decent showcase because you have a Nebraska, which was one of the perennial powers back then. Obviously, They weren't as good as they usually were around that time, but they were still a good team in Tech. And it actually was a blessing in disguise because that gave Tech a common opponent with Colorado. And Tom Osborne gave Tech his vote, and that helped Tech get the UPI title.
In addition to the UPI, we had a couple of others that gave us the national championship. I'm going off memory. I think the Sporting News did too, and I think there may have been one more. That
was a weird year. People, my generation will always point to 2007 in terms of craziness in the general college football scene. But 1990, I think, was crazy before that because no one could really. Colorado was the AP number 1. And they had a loss and a tie, not to mention the 5th down incident. But it was just because
I think it was that they had that. They had a loss, and we had the tie against North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and it was just. There was a lot of close games that we had there in '90, and you look back at the staff that Coach Ross had at Tech. My goodness, Ralph Region, the offensive coordinator, and George O'Leary, the defensive coordinator, and also some really good assistants. Danny Smith was a really good assistant. Brian Baker was a good assistant. Tech had some good assistant coaches under Bobby Ross.
And they would, and of course, later we'll talk about when I won't say most, but when the two big ones came back. And before I get into Lewis and the rest of what happened in the 90s, as a guy.
Lewis to me, I got to tell you, real quick, Lewis to me kind of reminded me of Bud Carson coming after Bobby died. And his style was different. And in looking back at it, if you're going to coach, and I'm sure he had his own philosophy, and this is the way I'm going to do it, but it was different than what the players had. And, they're looking at it like, hey, wait a second, we just won the national championship doing it this way. and Lewis wanted it done his way, and it was a butting of the heads. He had a huge win in his first year against Clemson on ESPN, but then had a huge, tough defeat that really kind of turned the corner against him in the FSU game at home, where we had a lead and lost it at the very end. I thought Bill and Sandy were really great people, and but he was in a tough spot, and he wanted it. His way was just so different than the way Bobby Ross had done it, and the players were like, hey, wait a second, we won a national championship doing it this way. So when we brought back O'Leary, things kind of settled down a little bit again, and George got the program rolling.
Yeah, so you summed up. I was planning on asking someone else, but you summed up the Lewis era pretty well for me. But what I was going to say is, as an aspiring guy who is getting into broadcasting, this was around the time where Al stepped down, and I forgot to mention him. He people, of course, I won't say it's unfortunate because Munson was great, but Munson is way more famous, at least in this state, than Al is, and I think that's really a shame because Al was fantastic from everything I've heard, and then Kim was a great guy as well.
Al was Tech, and the one thing, Al loved Georgia Tech so much, and everybody at Tech and the Institute loved him right back just as much.
Didn't they try and take him off when they switched to the WCNN? In the fans?
I'd heard that. Funny you should mention that. I'm going to throw a name at you. Tech had another sidekick coming behind
Brad
Alcerado. His name was Brad.
Yep, Brad.
Brad Nessler that does ESPN football games, and he was. You could tell he had it. He was an exceptional announcer, and I don't know. It was kind of you just weren't going to be able to keep him at Tech. They had found a diamond in the rough, and he was on his way. He's doing, as the cream of the crop SEC football games right now, and I've said, he's done NFL football games. He's just
he has a great voice.
Yes, he is.
And what's funny is when the '85 ACC basketball championships available on YouTube, and it's like Tech had two play-by-play guys.
They did.
And they basically did. And then after Al, age got to, he was around for so long.
Father Time gets all of us.
Age got to him, and he moved aside. And I think Tech had a guy, named Bob McCann or something like that.
Absolutely, they did. Very good, sir. Bob McCann replaced him. Bob wasn't a bad announcer, but he had the misfortune of following Coach Dodd. He was following Al Serrano, and not really sure kind of what happened, but I always thought he did a decent job, and next thing you know, he's not there, and then Wes comes in the hold. And
I think he was an analyst.
Wes was a diamond in the rough and a solid pro.
I think Bob McCann was the analyst after Nessler had left in basketball, and I think they pushed him up. I don't know how he left.
Off memory, that sounds right.
I don't know how he left, but he was there for, I think, he was the lead guy for 2 to 3 years. And then I think the year, 95, O'Leary's first year as head coach, I think that's when Tech got Wes. I think Wes came from Vanderbilt, if I'm right.
He did. That sounds right. Didn't he start off at someplace like Lipscomb or something like that?
He went to Elon. But I don't know if he called games there. He may have started at a smaller school and then just worked the ladder up.
He worked his way up. Yeah, he got to Vanderbilt and then from Vanderbilt to Georgia Tech.
Well, he did
Of course, his dad being Woody. My goodness, but Wes has certainly carved out his own niche, and it's just. I actually saw Wes at the Tech Hall of Fame banquet this past fall. It was fun to see him, and hadn't seen him in a while, and it's good to see him. He walked up to me, "Hey, John, how you doing?"
Well, that's great. And he was in the late '90s must have been exciting because Tech finally got some consistency, and then of course they beat Georgia 3 years in a row, which must have been super exciting. And Joe Hamilton and George Godsey and that offense.
We hadn't beaten Georgia 3 in a row since the Kennedy administration.
And that offense.
Think about that. Okay, but once again, hey, like I've told you earlier on our podcast here, Bud Carson was 4th and 10 late in the game. 4th and 10 from stopping Georgia on a 4th and 10 play, and he beats them 3 years in a row.
Man, well, we've had a bunch of those.
We have.
Especially recently. Goodness gracious.
Yep. It's been tough. Things have really changed so much as far as, obviously, Daniel, that you and I talk about with the NIL and the portal. I mean, it's what's going on now is I'd just like to say it's Pandora's box has been opened, and it's just craziness out there.
Well, I think at least in terms of I think in terms of football, we're definitely in a decent spot. Now,
yes.
Now, late '90s, Joe was there, and he was just fantastic. And I mean, his highlight. We're at the point where '90s, there's plenty of camcorders and whatever, so his highlight tape is readily available. It's incredible.
Correct. And Joe could throw long passes so well. And Dennis White was out there. Kelly Campbell was there. He had some really good wide receivers. Bobby Rodriguez and some others.
Bobby Rodriguez was earlier. He was on the '90
team. Yeah, he was. You're right. Yeah, you're
but he had Kerry Watkins.
Yeah, correct. Kerry Watkins. Thank you. Yeah, that's about that time.
And he had that catch.
I remember, Des White being the star. Des was from the Bowl School down in Jacksonville, and we were able to get him. And Des was quite a player.
And he had that game against Virginia where he just went off. I think he had 3 touchdowns.
Yes, he did.
And that was when Virginia, I mean, George Welsh deserves more praise. I mean, he didn't win a national title, but what he did at Virginia was remarkable. And I think he beat Tech a couple of times when he was at Navy, too.
Yep, I got one for you. We were talking about the Bowl School. Did you know that the Bowl School was actually head coach for the longest time of the Bowl School down in Jacksonville was a guy named Corky Rogers, and Corky Rogers played for Bobby Dodd.
Oh, wow. I actually think I heard of him.
Okay.
And
of course, the Bowl schools where Chipper Jones went to high school.
Wow. And so they must have a good athletic tradition for a high school.
You should have seen their weight room that we went into and pictures that were on the wall. We had family that lived down there for the longest time and wanted to go by and see the Bowl School, and we did, and got to meet Corky Rogers, and he gave us a little tour, and of course the weight room for a high school was spectacular and had all the great players that had come through the Bowl School. And boy, did they have a list.
Oh, man. After Joe, there was Gotze, who is our new offensive coordinator, and honestly, I know, people are like, he got fired from the NFL. Well, there's only 32 offensive coordinator jobs in the NFL. If you're a player in the NFL, your job is week to week there.
Yes, it is. The NFL means not for long.
Yeah, I mean, look what's happened to Kirk Cousins. I'm happy that we got George to come in. I had wanted him prior, but I get it. You're in the NFL. That's the top job, but we must have offered him a lot of money to come here, and it's good because we've, Buster's gone, and I think if you have a guy who's from here and wants to be here, that's good for stability.
Yeah, I think I do agree. I think he will bring us stability. Obviously, he and Key were roommates when they were at Tech. George has obviously gotten his a lot of good experience with the NFL. I think it was right there with Lincoln with the Ravens, so that won't hurt either. George was scrappy. I want you to tell you one little quick bit about George Gotze. George had a brother, Gary Gotze, and Gary Gotze was quite an athlete, even more so than George, and he ended up going to Notre Dame. Obviously my love for Tech and everything. When my son Kirby was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go down and play for Mercer down in Macon, he redshirted his first year, and that's 2012, and then he plays 13, 14, 15, 16 down at Mercer, and I was lucky to go maybe hit one Tech game a year. I kept up with him through the internet and highlights, but I was living on, as I like to say, a father's dream. I was watching my son play college football.
Well, that must be fun.
Play down at Mercer, and as you had mentioned earlier in the podcast, it was a big thrill for my wife and I, Missy, and my other son, Jeff, to be able to watch him go play football down at Georgia Tech. It was just we knew it was coming. We were hoping that he could stay healthy enough. Had a game against the Citadel before we played at Georgia Tech, and this was hoping that he'd stay healthy and stayed healthy for practice. And his whole football career was playing at Georgia Tech. It was the highlight of his whole football career, was being able to play football down where his grandfather played and my dad played, and huge, unbelievable feeling for my family and the Southard family as a general, for him to be able to go down there and do that. I want you to know that I had a brother, Daniel, that actually played football at Furman, and my brother was lucky enough, and he actually played in the NFL. A lot of people don't know that, but I had a brother that played in the NFL. He played a wide receiver for Furman, and when Bud Wilkerson became head coach for the St. Louis Cardinals, he ended up going there, and he played in 2 regular season games. This is back when there was a roster was at 41. There was no practice squad during that time. And he played in 2 regular season games, and then he was given the pink slip. But he was able to play. He always wanted to play at Georgia Tech, and he was a running back coming out of high school, but actually played wide receiver when he got to college, and it was a perfect fit for him. And he would, you don't make it to the NFL, Daniel, unless you're exceptional. Okay,
that's the cream of the crop.
You played just 2 or 3 games. I think Jerry Mays played 2 games with the San Diego Chargers, and people don't realize it's just, I remember Chan Gailey always made the comment. He said the biggest jump for football is not from high school to college, it's from college to the pros.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's everyone has, I mean, no matter the sport, when you see these guys get interviewed, they'll talk about their welcome to the pros moment.
Oh yeah, speed of the game. Everybody who's playing in the NFL, if you're a skill player, you're running a 4.5 at a minimum.
Oh my
you
goodness!
Have to be. Yeah, you have to be. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on the team.
Well, we've talked about football. We've been on for over an hour now, so I mean, we could talk for hours.
We could go for
days.
We could talk for a long time.
But I think now
I do want to talk about basketball with
you
for a quick second.
We've gotten.
I want to let you know a couple of things here that I was lucky enough. I got to see Rich Youngkin's last game that he played at Georgia Tech. My dad got some tickets from a friend that lived down the road from us, and my dad and I went to the game. I would remember watching Tech when we had Tico Brown, Sandy Drummer, Lenny Horton. All of them were really good players when we were in the Metro. Some of those players and some of those teams during that time, I was a good center named Jim Wood. We had a competitive team. We had some very good players, okay? And then, Bobby gets hired. I wrote this down, and I wanted you to hear me out on this. Bobby Crimmins' story. When he comes on board, he's hired, and he's starting out recruiting. And this is what I remember most about Coach Crimmins. We got involved with a player named Ernie Myers, okay? Ernie Myers is from New York, and he was a top 20 high school recruit, okay? We're involved with him. We're in his final 3. Okay, we didn't get him. He ended up going to NC State. But just the fact that we could get in on a player like that, get in his final 3, my goodness, I said, whoa, what do we have here? Crimmins, and then he had unbelievable assistants. And as always, you look at assistants from George Felton, Ben Joe, Perry Clark, Sherman Dillard. He had unbelievable assistants. Bobby had it rolling. Another one of my favorite Crimmins stories is, and hear me out on this one, there was a player coming out of high school, and his name was Reggie Williams, and he was the number 1 player in the entire country. Okay, he went to Dunbar, up in the D.C. area, and he's the number 1 player in the entire country, and we're involved with him. Okay, and we stayed with him to the very end. Coaches said, let's stay with him to the very end. They did. You don't get points for coming in second place. He ended up going to Georgetown and playing for John Thompson. But the very next year, okay, while we missed out on Reggie Williams, we bounced back and got Dwayne Farrell. Okay, so obviously Bobby with a short bench and lots of playing time was recruiting unbelievable. You find and you give credit to George Felton so much for finding Mark Price. What I mean, goodness gracious, how he got overlooked by some of the other schools is just absolutely amazing. Tech, we were talking about being due for some good luck. Luck started to turn our way. He got overlooked, brings in John Sally, extremely mobile, long-armed, 6'11" guy that could move, run the court. And the next thing you know, we're off and running. Been lucky in there's just a couple of games that I remember that I was at the game, and I wanted to mention this. Most exciting game, and I've been seeing a lot of really great basketball games down at Tech, but you would ask me, John, what's your favorite game you've ever been to down at Tech? I was with my mother, and we're playing Virginia. It's 1984. They had Odin Polynice, Othell Wilson, and we had Joseph, Sally,
Dalrymple,
Scott Betway, before Pharrell got there. And that game went triple overtime. And Othell Wilson had a shot at the buzzer to win it and missed it. It's the most exciting game still to me in my life that I've ever been to for Tech. I was at the game with my mom when Dennis Scott stole the ball on the inbound pass and hit the three-pointer against North Carolina. That was Tommy Hammond's last game, by the way. It was just unbelievable. But the Crimmins, the Ernie Myers, just getting involved as a player like that. We started recruiting at an unbelievable high level, and Bobby really had it going on behind the scenes. We kept making improvements to our facilities that we had. I wrote down a couple of players I wanted to mention. I had some favorite players during that time, and Bert Steppe was actually a guy I actually played against in high school when I played high school basketball.
And he was there when Crimmins took over.
Yeah, he was a senior and I was a sophomore, and I didn't get to play in that game, but I got fortunate enough to dress varsity when I was in the 10th grade. That was a big thing at the time. But Bert Steppe and Jovan Joseph, I had to say, were my probably two favorite players as far as basketball players that I've seen down at Tech.
Joseph was a story himself. He came from Haiti.
Correct.
And
Miami-Dade Junior College.
Yeah, and he was a JUCO player, and he was like, people are complaining about, now the pro stuff, we don't even have time to talk about that. The G League stuff, that's BS. But people are complaining about all these 6-year guys. Wasn't Joseph 27 years old?
He wasn't quite that old. He was like 24, as I can recall. He got started late, and when he came to Tech, his very first year, they redshirted him, which turned out to be a brilliant move. He really just redshirted his first year at Tech, let him get used to the speed of the game, okay, because they've been playing at Miami-Dade. I mean, you're going to talk about from Miami-Dade that's jumping in the ACC.
And this was when it was the ACC.
Yes, and it was, I think that was 83, and he plays with us 2 years after that, and Jovan, oh my goodness, had soft touch, but he was 6'10" and built like a rock, and he and Sally were just so strong on the front line, unbelievable. Jovan was built while Sally was slender and could run the court. Jovan had the strength down below, and you brought him into the lane, and he knew that he was a man.
And that group, Tech had only made the tournament once prior. That group made the NIT and then won the ACC and made the Elite Eight, and then that was the first of 8 straight tournaments that Crimmins made from 85 to 93, I think, and then later, of course.
The year that we went to the NIT, a lot of people, I remember watching Bob Lee on talking on ESPN. A lot of people thought that we should have made the NCAA's that year.
That was the year before. That was the year before they made it 64 teams. They would have made it the next year.
Yep. But even then, we were on the bubble. Okay, we were really turning the corner, and that was he had just some Bobby. I mean, we had nobody. You knew Mark Price was good, but nobody knew that Mark Price would be so good as he was. I knew that he was stellar. He could shoot the eyes out of it. He could run all day. He was strong, fast, but his dominance that he was able to do in the NBA really showed us behind the scenes just how extremely talented that he was, and it's amazing that we were able to get him.
And then in '86, Tech was ranked number 1 preseason and had another good year, and they beat Duke in what was, I think, a number 2 versus number 3 game. Were you at that game?
Yes, I remember. Gosh, I remember being in all those big games. I remember, we were number 1, but we had to move Sally from power forward to center, and we brought in Tommy Hammonds to play the 4. So if you look back at that lineup, I mean, you had Sally, Hammonds, Farrell, Dalrymple,
and Price.
And 4 of the 5 of those guys, Daniel, had long careers in the NBA.
All 5 of them played in the NBA.
Yeah, I think Bruce got invited. I don't even know if he.
Yeah, he may not made it. Yeah, he may. I don't know if he played in a game, but that was a lineup.
Joseph made it to play. By the way, Jovan Joseph played in 1 NBA game. Yes, he did. You can look it up. He played in 1 with the Nets.
Well, that group must have been exciting, and then later. Couple more good years, and then you get Anderson in, and then Scott.
Yeah.
Scott must have been something. That guy.
No, he was. Dennis, and what really Dennis flourished is when he lost weight. That's when he became ACC Player of the Year. He was still great. He'd probably be the first one to tell you, he was probably a good 30 pounds overweight, okay? And then he got himself in tip-top shape, got quickness back in his game, and really flourished. Dennis was still good, but needed to lose some weight. Bobby had some heart-to-heart talks with him about losing weight. He did, and but Dennis was still, even when Dennis was heavy, Dennis was extremely talented. I mean, he was one of the top, if not the top player in the country when we signed him. And I think Dennis was up from the Maryland area that I'm going off the top of my head.
I think he was either from there or from Florida, but he may have played. I think he went to prep school at Maryland.
Yeah, I think he may be prepped up there.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe he did.
And then Kenny,
being from that area,
and then Kenny Anderson. Kenny was just electric. His handle was something.
Oh yeah, I couldn't believe when we signed him. North Carolina we were involved in so many players in North Carolina that we'd take him to the end, and Dean was getting them. Pete Chilcutt, Scott Williams, Rick Fox. Those are guys I'm just going off the top of my head that we recruited when Bobby was there, and we would get involved with them. We'd take them to the end, and Dean was able to get them. When we're finally able to take Kenny Anderson away from them, they just kind of thought in the back of their mind they had him because Dean had gotten Kenny Smith, the NBA, he does inside the NBA. Kenny Smith that played at the same high school as Kenny Anderson, Archbishop Malloy up in New York.
And, Crimmins had a great knack for recruiting from New York, and he kind of got that. He and Dean Smith had a bond that not a lot of people think about. Both their mentors were Frank McGuire. And Frank McGuire.
Yeah, I remember when they would get together. They would get together, and that was the one thing that they both could agree upon. They could talk about, and both of them loved Frank McGuire. Both of them thought the world of Frank McGuire, and that's when those two. I remember reading that those two got together, and that was the bond that they would always talk about. And Frank, was sort of when Frank was at North Carolina. He got all those New Yorkers to come down south, yes, he did. He had the subway going down to Chapel Hill, and
Dean and Bobby carried that on.
He beat when North Carolina won the national championship.
He beat Will, yeah.
Yeah, correct. They beat Kansas, and they had Will Chamberlain.
And they and so both Dean and Bobby sort of carried that on, that sort of subway down south. Bruce is from New York, Stephon Marbury, Kenny Anderson.
Have you seen that? Did I send you that the video about Stephon Marbury?
About Syracuse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that amazing? He's begging Syracuse to go there. He wants to go to the Cuse, wants to play there, and Boeheim goes in there and tells him he's not going to start right off the bat. And that opened up the very next day. Crimmins walks in the door and says, I'm going to give you the ball and let you do what you want to do with it. And his mother goes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that's how we got him.
Well, to be in defense of Boeheim, because sometimes that pitch will land, sometimes it won't. But Dean Smith had a similar thing where he would tell people, "I don't know if you're good enough to start here." And sometimes it would land because people would appreciate his honesty, and then other times it was like Boeheim and Marbury, where they're like, "Well, I'm going to go where I can play."
Right.
And it worked in Tech's favor. And that 96.
I'm going off memory for North Carolina. I think Worthy, Michael Jordan, and Kenny Smith are the only ones to play right off the bat as freshmen for Dean.
J.R. Reed may have.
Yeah, he did. He came afterwards. Yeah, he did. Very good. From Virginia Beach.
Yeah, and I think in the 90s they may have had a couple. Vince probably did.
Started to change. How about Dean during his prime in the 80s?
Yeah.
He only had three, and Worthy was from Gastonia, Jordan from Wilmington, and Kenny was from New York.
And there's that famous Sports Illustrated cover before the 81-82 season where Carolina had that stellar year and won the title. They have the four.
I got to tell you, by the way, that you'll like this, that in the 82 championship game, Daniel, I was there.
You were in New Orleans?
Yes, I was there. My oldest brother got tickets, and I went with my two older brothers, and we went down to New Orleans for the Final Four that weekend. It was a great Final Four. Louisville was down there. Georgetown was down there. And Houston was there. So, and Houston had Olajuwon. So it was an unbelievable, great Final Four. And I was there. We stayed to the very. I saw Jordan hit his shot. Saw the turnover by, I think, Fred Brown. And Dean got his first title. And I've told my friends up here in North Carolina about Dean, and obviously he had so many great wins and a great coach. And the thing for me for Dean Smith, and a lot of people forget about this. They didn't live through this, but I did. Dean's biggest victory to me was bouncing back after we hadn't gotten the gold medal stolen from us in the 72 Olympics, okay, with all the communist countries voting on the Soviet side, and where we dug Collins with the clutch free throws, and we won the game, but we didn't win it. They finally got what they wanted, and so Dean was the head coach of the 76 Olympic team. And we were stacked. Okay, we had four. You're like this. We had 4 North Carolina players on that 76 Olympic team.
Was Walter Davis on that? Walter Davis Phil Ford, maybe.
Walter Davis, Phil Ford, Tommy Lagarde, and Mitch Kupchak.
Oh, that was a good group, and
oh yeah, those guys could play. You had Adrian Dantley, Kenny Carr played at NC State. Kenny Carr, by the way, I know you're kind of a North Carolina guy, but I was lucky enough, Daniel, in my life to see David Thompson play.
Oh, he was fantastic. Oh,
yes, he was.
Oh, he was something else.
Let me tell you something. You don't realize this because it was before your time, and you'd have to be my age to remember this. But even though Georgia Tech was not in the ACC, okay,
they played state, didn't they?
C.D. Chesley had the basketball games being televised into Atlanta. Oh, yeah. We're not in the ACC, and I'm getting to watch Bobby Jones and David Thompson and all those great teams they had up there during the early 70s. Those games are being televised in Atlanta. Okay?
And Tech played Carolina and State a couple times in the 70s.
They did, in the big North-South tournament. And we did. We beat them one time with Yonkers, by the way. A huge win for White Otter. We had Yonkers. We beat in the North-South, beat them back-to-back. We were to beat North Carolina and NC State, and back-to-back that. It was called the North-South tournament, and huge win. We had Yonkers, and Rich was special. We had one of the guards, Thorne, was an unbelievable guard for us, too. So those two guys, other guys were kind of role players. Those were the two leaders of the team, and that's when we ended up playing North Carolina, of all things, in the 71
NIT final.
Yes, in Madison Square Garden. They had a really, really, really good player that by the name of Bill Chamberlain, no relation to Wilt, and Bill was an exceptional, great player. Tech ended up losing by 20. I think we ran out of gas, but we had a really good team. Okay. And we were able to play North Carolina. The game was on TV. I remember that was back when the NIT was such a big thing. People today wouldn't understand it.
I think they had picked to go to the NIT instead of the NCAAs. They had bids from both.
The thrill of playing in Madison Square Garden.
And it's March Madness is great now, and I'm not even going to complain. I mean, the NIT's demise is just because March Madness has expanded, and honestly, it's one of the best things in sports. I hope we can.
Absolutely.
I hope we can get back.
My son Jeff, it's his favorite time of the year. He loves March Madness. He loves doing the bracket.
I tell my mom every year, it's better than Sunday at the Masters. It's better than Super Bowl Sunday. The two best days.
You and Jeff need to hang out, buddy. I'm with you.
The two best days of the year on the entire sports calendar: Thursday and Friday of the round of 64. Two best days of the year.
It's good stuff.
I hope we can get back there someday.
Tell me about it.
I mean, it's frustrating what's happened now, but
I feel for the coaches that we have right now. Obviously, some guard play that we have on this team is
pitiful.
Not been what we really wanted. Our guard play, by the way, last night we lost to Wake. Our guard play last night, Daniel, our starters went 4 for 20.
It's brutal. It's just
4 for 20 from the field's not going to cut it. I do feel for them though because Nadingo and Silla was supposed to be to carry the team, and I do know that the Bay has got an Achilles that's causing him sore. I don't know if it needs surgery. I don't know, but I know he's playing with a really sore Achilles. And of course, then Bay got hurt in the Duke game.
You mean Mo?
That game was New Year's Eve, and we were up by 6 at half. Only lost by 6 to him, and he got hurt. And it's like, oh my goodness, it couldn't have come at a worse time. I'm excited about some of the players that we have that's going on our team. But I will tell you this: if Damon gets another year, he will really be underneath the cooker because he would need a really good year next year.
I mean, I don't know how much. I mean, I kind of have an idea of how much money we have, but of course, I'm not behind the scenes. But unless we lose out, and behind the scenes, you know how I feel about Damon. I'm up to here with him, but I think that unless we lose out, which is likely, but we have Notre Dame this weekend, which now it is up there, which is the Dome of Death. We can't win up there. We haven't won up there in my life, but we have Florida State. We beat NC State, so I would be shocked if we lose out.
A few more games that are winnable. The Notre Dame point guard that broke his foot. I don't think he's back yet.
Burton, yep.
He's what was his name?
Marcus Burton.
Burton, thank you. Burton, yes. He's from South Bend, and he broke his foot, and it was them losing Burton was like us losing Silla. Okay, kind of really did in their team.
And it's sort of and then who else is there? We got some tough games. We got Louisville, we got Virginia, and they'll beat us.
Yes.
But Florida State's not good. Florida State's not winnable.
I'm with you. We got some games. The FSU game here. The Luke Locks, by the way, quick story. Tech tried to recruit Luke Locks and he ended up going to FSU right out of high school in Florida.
Was that?
Hey, buddy, let me tell you something. If I'd only had studied in school like I knew my sports, I might have gone to Georgia Tech.
I'm the same way with you, but I think we both. Yep. I think we both might have turned out okay, at least so far in our life.
Amen on that.
Well, as I we have about 10 minutes left. As I sort of start to wrap this up, I think now's a good time to talk about.
Hey, I got one for you. Okay, for all the listeners out there, and I've mentioned this to you. The one thing about my dad, and it's do you remember the trivia question I had told you about regarding my dad?
Oh, he was the first guy to play on television. It was local,
Correct.
But television.
Correct. My dad was the starting quarterback when Tech played their first game on TV. It was not national TV. It was regional TV. He played on WSB, and it was my father's junior year down at Tech. So TV was starting to break out, and I do remember, Dan, I got to tell you that the pressure I remember my dad talking about during that time that Tech was the only game in town. And so it was, going to a Tech game was the thing to do as far as the city of Atlanta. And my dad, I remember talking about Well, he, enjoyed playing, loved playing for Coach Dodd, had great teammates. When his career was over, I think he was just happy that it was over. I can't tell you how many people in my life have come to me and said, well, why didn't your father play in the NFL? And back then, they didn't hardly make any money. It's not like it is today. And Coach Dodd wanted his players
to succeed in life.
Yeah, he didn't want them to go play in the NFL. You're not here to go to the NFL. You're here to get the diploma and go out in the business world. So,
we forgot to talk about, you talked about the Tennessee game, that your dad's first game, and we play Tennessee this year. I think that's just fantastic that series is resuming. And it's fabulous that's going to be on campus this year. Did your dad ever talk about Dodd and Nealon coaching against each other? Because they didn't hate.
I can't remember if he would just anything that he talked about any of the opposing teams. I remember he would talk about they had plays that were drawn up that he would tell my grandparents, his mom and dad, that what plays they were going to run to start the game. He was able to call plays, and it was pretty. It was in Atlanta during that time was just a completely different city, and Tech was the king of the wheel, and we were really running on, especially it laid the groundwork for the run that we had in the 50s, and a lot of people that have come up to me and said that they saw my father play, that they always made the comment that he was the one that had set the tone for the run that we made into the 1950s. And by the way, I remember in my life, Daniel, I remember talking to Kim King, and really one special one here I want to mention was Wade Mitchell. My sister and I were able to take my dad to the Letter Winners Club when they had for a Tech game, and Wade Mitchell was there. He was nice enough to come over and meet my father, and he looked at my dad and said, "Jim, I must have heard a million stories about you." And that's one of the things I know Wade has passed here recently, but made a huge impression on me. And my dad was, I can't tell you, I am my father's biggest fan, Daniel, and he knew that. My father gave me his Georgia Tech Hall of Fame ring, and Georgia Tech, I'll tell Jack Williams this, I'll tell you this, and all of the listeners out there, Georgia Tech has had 1,000 players play for them, but Georgia Tech's never had a son of a former player that looked up to their father like I did mine.
Well, it's fantastic that's just great. And my dad played JV there in the Scottish Rite game. And it was in the 80s when it was winding down, and it was the only game that they played because JV had really been phased out basically by that point. But my dad has told me stories of his dad watching me able to watch him play, because my grandfather grew up listening to Dodd's teams on the radio, and he grew up a Tech fan. And so even though it was a JV game, my grandfather was just apparently over the moon watching my dad play in that that game.
It was a huge thrill. You can only imagine how my wife and I felt when he actually played at Georgia, when my son got to play at Georgia Tech.
Oh, that must have been great.
My best friend, I texted in the middle of the third quarter. We're on the Mercer side, by the way. That was decked out in Mercer Bear gear, okay? And I texted my best friend that was sitting in my seats across the way on the west end, and midway through the third quarter, I texted him, Daniel, and I said, "Can you believe this?" Okay, it was just so hard for me to believe that it actually happened. And as I like to say, the best part was the game ended and he walked off the field.
Yeah, and I think it ended in the best way it could have for both sides. Tech won, and Mercer, but yes. Mercer did not embarrass themselves. Mercer held their ground.
That was the year we went down to the Tech went to the
Gator Bowl.
Beat Kentucky.
That's the last time we've beat Georgia. Goodness, I hope that happens soon. I think
about it. You and me both.
I think, as good as it will always hurt me that this group that we had coming out with those seniors were not able to win. But goodness, have we been able to make the gap closer, because while we talked about the Curry years, it was 21, 22.
We can keep it close. It's like when Alabama had 5 turnovers and we were able to beat them that year. If we keep it close, we can get some breaks, hopefully get a W on our side.
Well, I think, there's a lot of fog, ahead because it's going to be a new group. For all the NIL turnover and all the roster turnover, we had a solid foundation for 3 years with King and Jamal Haynes and all those guys. And so
hard to believe what a great career Haynes King had, and thank you Texas A&M. Thank you Jimbo Fisher for kind of pushing them out.
And so it's going to be a new, group.
We've got like half our team are new players if you count the freshmen.
But I think we're going to be all right. I love Key. I wish nothing but the best for Key. I've never, even growing up, I liked Paul.
About Brent Key, he's driven. He knows tech, knows the ins and outs of it, and very pleased with what he's obviously done with the program. And by the way, it was a tough, heartbreaking loss we had against BYU.
Oh, that one hurt.
In the Pop-Tarts Bowl. But did you happen to read the paper about what the wide receiver from BYU?
Like today? What happened? Yeah, let's not get into that, but I saw it.
Yeah, let's don't, but yeah, you saw it.
Okay. Yeah, right. That's messy, but I love Brent Key, and I think we'll be all right. It may be a transitional year. We may go 7-5, which in terms of the roster, I'm not going to be mad at that. At Alabama, they'll fire a coach over that. But if we go 7-5, make a bowl game, that's okay. Obviously, I want us to be as good as possible, but I think we're going to be all right this year.
We'll be scrappy. Let's see what happens.
I'm excited for Haynes.
Hopefully the Mendoza quarterback will be good.
Justice Haynes apparently is a stud.
The coach was the key to us getting him because they had the connection.
And I've heard Justice Haynes is apparently a stud, that guy from Michigan.
Okay. Oh yeah. Daniel, he's played at Alabama and Michigan. And he has started, okay, yeah. We got his high school coach that we have on staff was a big part of that.
Yeah, and we have Hosley back, and so the running back room will probably be the strength of the offense. I think it's good that Mendoza he's more, of course, his brother did everything, but his brother was more of a thrower, and from what I've seen, Alberto is more of a runner, which is good, of course. I mean, we're kind of running quarterback U in terms of if you look at history, because we had Paul, and then, of course, Haynes King threw himself all over the field anyway. So
he really did. When Haynes ran with the ball, boy, that's what made him so deadly.
And
he just, of course, when you run the ball, you take hits, and it's a double-edged sword there, because he is your starting quarterback. He's going to take hits, and it's not exactly what you want.
But I'm excited for the future, and I think even in the NIL era, we're doing it the right way, which makes me happy.
Absolutely. But Daniel, did you have to be my age to understand, or close to my age, to understand how bad our Grant Field and our stadium looked? Okay, it was, oh my goodness. Okay, we need to say that we were behind the times when Homer took over. It is an understatement. We just put it this way: we'll never be that low again in our life.
Oh, and especially in basketball. Like, even after all these losses, I remind myself, look, if I'm mad at this, I probably would have stopped being a fan if I had gone through 4-23.
It was tough.
But that was necessary.
That was tough. It was tough, but look what it brought us. Lady Luck came on our side. You can get lucky on certain things.
Oh yeah, and that was back when the ACC was so tough. I mean, Tech joined and just got popped in the mouth, but that was the premier basketball league of the time.
Absolutely. The year before we joined, though, we had just lost Sammy Drummer and Tico Brown.
Yeah.
With those guys, it would have been a little bit different story. Now, don't get me wrong. When we were in the ACC, we had two legit, ACC players, and Lenny Horton and Brooks Steppe. And Brooks Steppe would develop into a first-round NBA pick.
Well, I think we are, running low on time.
Yeah, we're going over time here.
Yeah, but
To all my listeners out there, I'm sorry I talked to your off.
oh, it's fine. I mean, that's kind of what podcasts are for, is it not? I mean,
Hey, I want to shout out to my wife Missy and my son Jeff and my other son Kirby.
thanks for listening, everybody, and thank you, John, for coming on and just talking ball with me for the past hour and a half. As for the next episode of the Steam Whistle, I have no idea, but I do know in a couple of weeks I'm going to be working on the end of that Tech Georgia documentary. I'm going to get into the 90s on that next part. I'm going to work on that during my spring break, which comes up in February. I'm just going to go home, spend time with my dog, and hit the ground running there, which is going to be great. That should come out around April. Again, thank you, John, for joining me, and
Thank you, sir.
we'll see y'all next time.